Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special Rangers review podcast where I'm delighted to be joined by Dr Rajpal Brar all the way across in Los Angeles as we talk concussions in football in relation to Leon King's, of course, recent concussion suffered against St Mirren and the general issue with heading in matches as well regarding the latest news. But first of all, Rajpal, thank you very much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate you reaching out.
Yeah. So just to give maybe the listeners and the viewers a little bit of background about yourself. You're a doctor and you've got a focus on different sports and in football in particular as well, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm a doctor of physiotherapy and I focus on elite sport, a lot of which is footballers.
Yeah, fantastic. So, with regards to concussions then, Rajpal, recently Leon King was stretchered off. It really was a nasty gash he suffered in a league match against St Mirren. A club statement afterwards read that Leon King suffered a concussion in the second half of the match and was taken to hospital for assessment. Leon was discharged from hospital with advice in the but he will now rest completely and follow a graded return to play under the supervision of the medical team. So it was just to get an idea, Raj, in terms of a concussion and the effects of a concussion on a sportsman. Can you just give us a sort of general idea of what that entails?
Yeah, sure. So I think first thing to know is that what really happens when you have a concussion, first, medically, it's known as a mild traumatic brain injury, mild TBI. And so what happens is when you have that injury is that there's actually chemical changes in the brain, which then lead to symptoms. It's not really as much physical damage in the brain. It's chemical changes. And that can lead to symptoms like, let's say, nausea, vomiting, vision loss, etc. And so that's what's causing a lot of those symptoms. And typically for most people, those will resolve within 7 to 10 days. But those 7 to 10 days are critical to allow the brain to recover.
Yeah, fascinating. And in terms of that graded return, can you give us an idea what that could possibly mean? Is that just, I guess that the club will be taking advice from medical practitioners in terms of when that player can safely return to action?
Yeah, so basically graded return means, what that means is that you start off with low level activity and then you want to assess how the person responds. If they have, it's not as simple as no symptoms and having symptoms. There's some variance in there. And so you go light activity. If that individual then clears that check, you then increase the activity intensity a little bit every day. Again, assessing for symptoms until finally they're able to complete more heavy or football-related intensity, and then eventually they're cleared. And so basically you're using activity kind of as a barometer to stress the brain and the physiology and see how that person responds.
Yeah. Is there a general rule of thumb in terms of timescales when a player may suffer concussion when they can safely be back playing, or does it depend on the level of the severity of the injury?
I mean, it always does depend on the severity, but typically on average, you're looking at that 7 to 10 day return timeline. And I think in FIFA, World Cup going on, I believe it's at least a 7-day minimum. Although, so 7-day minimum is kind of what the standard is, but of course it varies depending on not just the person's symptoms, but their previous history, right? So if you have a history of multiple concussions, you now may have a lower threshold for future concussions. So you might want to be a little bit more conservative, right? And so all those variables come into play. So it's not always that just one size fits all approach.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess it ties in the wider issue I wanted to ask about. It's topical because of the World Cup that's going on just now. We've seen that the Iran goalkeeper recently is where he was allowed to play on for a bit of time before coming off. What's the feeling around head injuries in football at the moment, Raj? Do you think that more needs to be done in terms of taking advice off of medical professionals and taking those decisions whether a player can play on out of the manager's hands, if you like?
Yeah, I think really what needs to be done is the fact that we know you can't do a valid concussion test on the pitch. You just can't. There's too much noise, there's too much pressure, right? The person needs to be taken off the pitch. Typically takes about at least 10 minutes, but that would require a temporary substitution. So I don't even blame the providers because they're not given the environment to be able, they're doing the best they can with what they're given, right? And there is a lot of pressure also from, this is real life, from coaches. The coach wants the player to play, right? Yeah. The player wants to play. Of course, in an ideal environment, it'd be the medical team making the decision, but this is, that's just not how it works unfortunately. And so, I mean, I think that the biggest thing would be is, can you potentially put in a temporary substitution rule? And so I think even Nico Williams, for example, recently played 10 minutes after suffering a head injury and then came off, right? And so again, it's just you're kind of setting up not just players for failure, but you're setting up your providers for failure too, because you can't do a valid test that quickly. It's just not possible.
Yeah, but you mentioned the temporary substitutions. You think that could be the sort of the avenue, the way forward to alleviate this? Because like you said, the manager's under intense pressure. If a key player suffers a head injury and they want to continue, it's hard for them to just to take them off. You've got the fans, like you say, a lot of noise around the stadium as well. So perhaps a temporary substitution might alleviate that pressure somewhat.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I mean, having looked at it, over the years, I think that is the best balance in terms of player health and safety. And also, right, like you said, that, there are real concerns for manager. You want a player to stay on, because what if it isn't a real concussion and the player gets subbed off and it's a key player, right? So, to me, that is the best balance. Will it happen? I don't know. We know how long football can take to make changes. Even I think we're going to discuss some changes coming up right now in a second. But so with the limited header rule, right? So
I wanted to talk that. I'm glad you brought that up, Raj. The news this week in Scottish football, new guidelines on heading are being introduced. What it means is they're going to restrict heading the day before and after a game. Clubs are also advised to limit exercises that involve repetitive heading to one weekly session. Guidelines come after groundbreaking research from Glasgow University. What's your feeling towards this, Raj? You think this is a good move?
I think, definitely a step in the right direction. I think we've seen the data. It's coming out more and more strongly now. Of course, I think that was a great study done there, is where that this repetitive heading, even low-level heading, what we call sub-threshold, below the threshold of a over concussion, can lead to cumulative kind of fatigue and wear, right? And so it makes sense to limit it. Of course, I don't think personally, you can't ever eliminate heading from the game. That's not football. But I think you have to, again, there's this balance between player health and safety and the game. And so I think this is a good compromise in that regard. And I actually like the not allowing it 24 before or after, because you're going to, obviously, when you're in a game, you're going to have a lot of those impacts. So you might as well limit it, right? And I think we're starting to see the brain or concussion treated more like a muscular injury, where you don't want to overload it. And so it's the same principles. I think the hardest part when it comes to brain or concussions is that it's really hard to measure these things. Whereas when it comes to more of a muscular fatigue, we have more objective testing to measure that. And so it's going to be always to be a little bit more nebulous when it comes to the brain, but I think we're starting to see that same kind of models applied, which is a good step definitely a step in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to touch on that there. You did mention you don't think it's going to lead to an all-out ban on heading in the game. Do you feel it just seems that a lot of research being done now, and a lot of questions over here in Scotland that it may lead to a ban in actual matches as well. But it's hard to see how that would occur at any point, isn't it? I guess it's just that repetitive heading that you want to eliminate the best you can.
Yeah, I think it's just there's some stuff like I grew up playing football. I don't know if you did, but like you're just heading the ball back and forth in practice like for 10 minutes. Why? Like, does it really help you?
Yeah.
like what's the risk reward benefit here, right? And so it's like little things like that you can cut out, and so and it's just things like that. And so I think and it's not just for football; it's for any sport where if you're seeing certain things that you can improve for player health. We have to improve the techniques and the training and everything that comes along with it. And I think that this is one aspect of that. I don't ever think the pendulum should swing to the extreme where there's no heading in football, because that's not football.
Yeah. And I mean, of course, this is happening in Scotland. It was announced this week, Raj. But what is the situation over in the United States? Is it a similar sort of viewpoint they have over there with regards to heading?
Yeah, I mean, in the U.S., I think it's been like multiple years now where they haven't allowed heading in under 12, or it's very limited, and they gradually allow more and more. So I think it's a similar viewpoint in that regard for sure.
Yeah, fantastic. And of course, you'll be watching the World Cup at the moment. United States qualifying last night. Do you think they can go far in the competition?
It's tough. I mean, it really just comes down. They've actually played quite well. Either they might have played the best out of that group overall, but it as we know in football, if you can't find the touch in the final third, the rest of it doesn't really matter, right? And that's been the issue. I think it's an interesting matchup on Saturday, right, versus the Dutch. So especially with Van Gaal plays a little more conservative style, and so we'll see. But they've been very, very clinical. I mean, Gakpo has been on fire in front of the net. So I mean, let's see what happens. I mean, knockout football is knockout football. So it's so hard to predict anything. So.
Yeah, that's when the proper World Cup starts. And you do great work. That's where I found you on Twitter, Raj. If people want to find out more about what you do and the sort of advice and things that you give out, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, TikTok. I have a YouTube channel. It's right here, 3CB Performance. So, yeah, feel free to, I love people who comment and ask questions. So, people like yourself who want to comment and ask questions, that's why I do it. It's more for education than anything else.
Yeah, well, it's absolutely fantastic speaking to you. Thank you very much for coming on the show. It's been great to have a chat.